Hey Danny, how you doing, man?
We have all the time in the world.
We do have all the time in the world.
Well, we've got an hour, so let's
Good old Daniel Craig. This is a bit of an obvious thing to say at the start of a podcast with the title such as ours. We're going to be spoiling No Time to Die quite massively. So if that's not your jam, then leave.
Yeah.
Watch the movie, come back and listen to the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even do plot summaries, so just, assume that you've seen it, written notes on it, and are prepared to now talk about it for an hour. That's the mindset you need to have when watching our show. But before we do that, Lewis,
Yes.
we've got some bullshit to talk about, don't we?
I like that little laugh. That was very scary.
Sort of fits who we're going to be talking about. But are you ready for me to spin the wheel?
I am born ready. I am very ready. This strand of hair isn't ready. There we go. Now it's slightly more ready. It'll pop out again in a minute. But yeah,
Okay.
Go on, spin the wheel.
It's a fighter jet. The Tory Party Conference.
Ooh, has there been some... I was not even aware there was one. What happened? Was it very dramatic?
Oh, it was very good.
Oh, good.
So, there was Big Bojo was there.
Who doesn't have a bit of Bojo?
As you do.
Sex symbol, leader of the country.
Yeah, so he was there doing his usual bit, going up and making no sense. And, his speech was mixed, if that's what we want to call it.
It was English and something else, or...
Oh yeah, well there was Latin in it, obviously,
because
you can't tell people what you're going to do for the next couple of years without speaking Latin.
Yes, you have to let the ancient Romans know what you're about to do. They have to know.
Absolutely. There was a beaver joke at the end. I can't remember what the joke was,
right, okay.
But if we want to get one of our fact checkers onto that,
am I the fact checker? I'll have a quick Google.
Yeah, have a look for the beaver joke.
Boris Johnson announces just one policy. Sorry, meaning of build back beaver. What? This is hitc.com. I don't even know what this is. Johnson coined the phrase "build back beaver," leaving spectators bemused.
That's a nice word.
Oh right, okay. Okay. Apparently, "build back better" is the Conservative Party slogan.
Yeah.
And he used the phrase "build back beaver." I can only presume he was talking about beavers.
I'm sure he was talking about beavers. I didn't watch the full thing. It was like 46 minutes, Lewis. But in terms of...
He also said "build back burger," apparently.
Build back burger. He called Jeremy Corbyn a sort of custarding communist cosmonaut at one point.
Okay.
He loves his alliteration, Boris, doesn't he?
Apparently so, yeah.
Very, very, very enthusiastic about it. But the build back beaver, maybe versions of BBB. What's that?
Many versions of BBB disappeared before I could read it as well.
Same.
Many versions of BBB. Build back batter was another one.
Oh.
Because he loves fish and chips.
Was it a chip van? Oh my. Yeah, but the reason that I want to talk about the Tory Party Conference is because anyone that watched the Tory Party Conference could only come away with the feeling that these people that are in government, that are meant to be representing the people's interests, probably don't give a flying fuck in any respect. And for some reason, even though his speech was just absolute nonsense from start to finish, lack of coherence, levelling up a couple of times, the Tories managed to get away from it with very little criticism whatsoever.
Of course they did.
No criticism. They're what is it they're doing now with universal credit? It's going to be £1,000 a year less.
Yeah,
for people.
I actually wrote to my local MP about this. This is something that I didn't know about at all until Equity emailed me. I presume you're also in Equity, Dan.
I am in equity, yes.
Yeah, they emailed me and said there's a massive cut to universal credit. Apparently, at the start of the pandemic, universal credit was boosted a bit because the idea is that if you're in a low-income household, your income will be even lower because you will be less likely to work, and if you can work, you might be doing less work, which might mean that you can't have as much money. And so universal credit was boosted to get you a bit more cash in, and now they've said, okay, pandemic's over, universal credit's going back down.
Yeah.
In spite of the fact it's not a very costly thing.
And it's not over.
Compared to, Trident. And the pandemic is not at all over.
Absolutely. It's 30% of children are in relative poverty in this country, and it just seems that even with the plethora of things that we can laud at the Tories, there is very little sort of, what's the word? Opposition, if that's
Yes.
the right phrase. Because I watched Keir Starmer speak at the Labour Party conference,
Yeah.
and he was more interested in sort of saying how Labour was utterly defeated in the last election, and he spent a lot of time saying that. He spent a really long time, rather than spending the. I mean, if I was Keir
Sorry,
Starmer,
I haven't
right?
seen this speech, but from how you're describing it, I can only imagine it's Keir Starmer on a podium going, listen, guys, listen. We are shit. We are really shit.
Yeah.
We failed massively. We are absolutely fucking awful.
Yes.
I haven't seen the speech, but I can only imagine that's what it was like.
It absolutely is what it was like. If I was Keir Starmer, which I'm not, in case you had to figure that one out, I would spend the 46 minutes speaking absolutely tearing in to the Tories and the apparent corruption, the constant lies that they tell, the cut to
the apparent
public
negligence
services.
for human lives,
Yeah,
the apparent negligence for self-employed people,
thousands
negligence for
of bodies
creative industries,
piling up, just so many things that you I'm sure there's a list out there of stuff that you could get the Tories in on, but
and I would be surprised if it weren't in Sir Keir Starmer's desk.
yeah,
Because it should be. There should be a guy saying, look, Starmer, say these things. These things are
Absolutely.
all places that the Tories have fucked it during the pandemic.
yeah,
Say some of these things, please, God.
absolutely. So I just wanted to sort of talk about the sort of weird power that Tories have in this country to say some of the most horrible, blatantly horrible things,
Yeah.
and somehow just sort of get away with it. But when someone like Angela Rayner calls Tories scum, which
Accurate.
just too soft, Angela, too soft. How is it that Tories can just get away with calling Muslim women letterboxes, calling gay people bum boys and things like that? Just blatantly disgusting things to say. The grim, toothless face of the North. It's constant, and then
It is.
when someone on the other side gets reasonably outraged and said, "What a bunch of scum!" It's, oh my God, what happened to civility politics? It's just so ridiculous. But
it's absurd. I think I have watched the video of that politician saying that and getting ejected from the House of Commons.
yeah,
I don't know if you shared it with me, Dan, or if I watched it on air or something, but it's utterly horrific to see because she's being very polite about it.
Yeah.
She's sort of saying in a very polite tone, sort of, I've seen the decisions that the Tory party have made, and in my opinion, they are scum. She's being very polite about it, and the speaker's getting quite irate.
yeah,
And sort of very much getting angry at her, which is just something terrible to see. It the only thing it puts me in the mind of is, I couldn't give you a date for the life of me, but in recent years, in the Australian Parliament, there was a politician that called another politician a cunt. And there was this great furore about, you can't speak like that in the House of Commons, it's unpolitical, it's undemocratic.
yeah,
And in the end, they concluded that it's down to freedom of speech. Any minister needs to be able to say what they want to say in the House without fear of being criticised, because otherwise we won't get anything done.
absolutely.
Or, on the other side, we might get too much done. and there's some backbencher that's refusing to say anything because they are afraid they'll get ejected from the house.
Yeah.
So you should... I am utterly baffled by Keir Starmer full stop, but also by Keir Starmer's decision to just be like, Labour are a bit shit. Because there's so... Surely to God, you would just turn around and say, actually, look at all these horrific things that Boris Johnson's government have done.
Yeah.
Look at all these horrendous things on record that Priti Patel has done and said. It's insane.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I saw Owen Jones go to the Tory Party conference, and he had quite a few conversations with Conservatives. And
remind me, Owen Jones he wrote The Establishment, and was it Chavs?
I can't remember the book that he wrote, but he's a
couple of them, yeah.
He's a left-wing journalist. Very, very, very good. Very underrated, I think.
Chavs, The Establishment, loads of stuff, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hello, Owen, if you're watching this. But yeah, so he spoke to quite a few Conservatives, and they were pretty talkative to him and said the usual sort of stuff about work hard and you'll get ahead in life and stuff. So, I mean, I can't let... you expect that from Conservatives. That's the sort of talking points that you get, the same way that, people on the left have their talking points. But see, when it came to people like Michael Gove, just senior leaders, they either ran away or just refused to answer his questions properly. So it was very entertaining to watch, and it just, if we can get more of that to make people
hold people accountable. Yeah.
I don't know what we can do at this point to make people realise that these people have no interest in your health or benefit whatsoever. But I just think the only way we can is to make people see it is by doing stuff like that. Mockery is a really good way of showing people's hypocrisy, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm not a very angry man in general. I'm quite laid back. But some of these disgusting things that the Tory government have done do really infuriate me. Yeah. And the only other thing that comes close is people that sort of say, well, nobody knew how bad the pandemic would get. Well, no, but isn't that an excuse to go to fatalism? Yeah. To think, well, what if this gets to the point where there are just people dying everywhere? Like it did. That's what happened.
Absolutely.
Another thing that gets me is look at New Zealand and how they essentially quarantined the entire island and was like, yep, okay, well, nobody's coming in or out. And then 3 weeks later, there were people at football games again, there were concerts, all sorts of stuff. Yep. It's all well and good to say New Zealand has a much lower population than the United Kingdom and all these sort of things. But it's essentially the same thing. It's a matter of policy and a matter of principle, and you can extract it and make it bigger. So definitely. Why not? Why do we have to suffer in this system where the Tory government is deliberately being cruel to line their own pockets? It's disgusting.
Yep, there is absolutely no excuse for it.
Sorry, that's that quick angry thing came out then. Darius has just said in the chat, did you see the video of Jacob Rees-Mogg? I did. Did you see the video of Jacob Rees-Mogg, Dan?
I didn't.
It's brilliant.
What is it?
Well, it's also sad at the same time. It's a man who I believe had cerebral palsy, and he worked as... I think he worked in the education system in some capacity, and he lost his job due to government cuts during the pandemic. And he said, before I got fired, we needed more people, and then you cut our funding, and I was fired. And Jacob Rees-Mogg is there saying, well, I'm sure that if you go down to the job centre, and if you look for help and stuff, you'll be able to go and get help. He said, no, I had a job, and you took it away from me. And your government took it away from me. And Rees-Mogg doesn't know what to say. He just keeps apologising and says, oh, God, the thing that really got me, I'm sorry that you feel that way. Oh, you bellend. You absolute cunt. But it's so insane to see somebody literally shouting in Jacob Rees-Mogg's face about how you have deliberately worsened my life. Do you not feel anything? And to see Rees-Mogg going, no, I don't feel anything. I just don't give a shit.
It's not even indifference to people in poor. It's contempt for people in poverty and horrible sort of living conditions. To go back to Owen Jones, a lot of Conservatives were saying that the reason that people are in the situations that they're in is because they just don't know how to manage money. That's the reason.
Fucking bollocks is that?
What absolute
bit, then.
fucking the people that have money don't know how to manage money, because when they do have money, they're busy spending it on fucking curtains and high grade cocaine and so it's like the idea that if you have more money, you're going to be more
able
more
to deal
sort
with
of,
it.
yeah, exactly. It's just bollocks. It's absolute bollocks. Very rarely. Very, 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 very rarely do people who start with nothing end up in a very privileged position. Okay,
I loathe the idea of this self-made man philosophy that is a very right-wing concept, which I think is what you're building to. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but before it leaves my brain, I think Jeff Bezos is sort of considered an example of a self-made man, but he got a $500 million loan from his parents.
Yes.
Elon Musk is considered a self-made man. He inherited an emerald mine in South Africa.
Yep.
These people are not self-made. They inherited their wealth. It's old money that just because they're using it on something new, it's still old money. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Just completely made my point for me there. Do not believe when you are told you just work hard all your days and you will make it in the system in which you live. The system requires the majority of people not to make it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this. If everyone was rich and wealthy and lived in the best living conditions, there would be no point to the system at all. They require people that they consider beneath them and have contempt for to do jobs that they just wouldn't do. They just wouldn't want to do it.
It's almost as though we need massive systemic change.
Yeah. Don't believe it. It's bollocks.
Is the problem. Yep.
It's utter bollocks. I lived on Universal Credit. You get $340 to live on a month, and PIP is also exactly
$340 a month.
That is
Goodness me. That's. I'm sorry. I live in a fairly cheap area of the country to live. That's nothing. That doesn't even cover probably even half of my bills for the month. That's absurd.
And the idea that people that get that can feed a family as well, let alone live yourself, it's like, no, unbelievable.
Yeah, that's utterly disgusting. I can't abide by that at all. That's utterly disgusting. This is why I'm so massively in favour of the idea of a universal, a UBI system. I was going to say universal credit. I was like, no, that's what you're arguing against, Lewis. That's why I'm so massively in favour of a UBI system, because if you can find a way to demonopolise things like water and gas and all the rest of it, and then you can establish a rough median to say, okay, everybody in the country will pay about this much in their bills every month. If you can just establish that baseline number and then help people to reach that number, even if the UBI isn't 100% of that number, which, I mean, it should be at least double, but even if the UBI is half of that number or a third of that number, giving people a little bit of extra help to get to that base level of being able to pay all your bills and being able to live in a house and be comfortable and warm and fed, if you can just get to that point, morale increases, public health increases, work ethic increases. People will do more because they can do more.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's disgusting to think there are people out there thinking, what should I have for dinner? Oh, I should have a nap because I can't afford to buy any food.
Yeah.
What should I have for dinner? I'll have roasted quail with Scandinavian duck egg. Do you know what I mean? It's absurd to me. Utterly absurd to me.
No, it really is. You know what? There's a tweet that I saw recently that said, "This is the last thing I'll say, and then we can, because we're 19 minutes in." But it was, you give I can't remember what it was. You give $500 to a rich person. No, you give $500 to a poor person, and it will be gone in a week. You give it to a rich person, and it will increase in its value 50%, and it will just become so much more than you originally had. And then someone put at the bottom, translation, it will go in a week because poor people can't afford to invest $500 for 3 years. But if you are incredibly wealthy, you can afford to do that because you're already wanting for nothing. I mean, it's such bollocks. Oh, it gets me so angry.
Gets me angry too. Should we spin the wheel and talk about something else?
Let's talk about something else that'll make us angry.
Go on, spin the wheel then, Dan. I want to hear what the next bit of bullshit is.
Okay, here we go. You ready?
I was born ready. I was born ready, excited, and sexy.
I'm going to need to do that again because you talked all the way through it, Lewis. COP26.
Policeman 26? What's he done now? What's he up to?
You said that before when we recorded this for the first time. Yeah, so COP26, I believe, stands for Council of Parties, I think.
Oh.
It does stand for... I'm sure it stands for that. It does.
Oh, okay, cool.
Conference for the Parties. And essentially what it is the United Nations Climate Change Conference, where people talk about how to deal with climate change, a very real and present threat that will probably cause massive problems for future generations to come. And this year it's taking place in Glasgow, which is where I live.
Hey!
Yeah, don't tell anyone that though. So it's important, very important, and I wanted to sort of have a conversation about this and also the other climate-related debate and arguments that have been going on in the past couple of weeks. I think you've got Insulate Britain and things like that, sort of stopping traffic, and that's caused...
I've only been vaguely aware of that, but yeah.
Yeah. I think I saw something on Jeremy Vine where this guy who was talking about... Oh, what's his name? It wasn't a bit... He was very against Insulate Britain. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
Jeremy Vine. What's his name?
Jeremy Vine?
No. The guy's name. Oh, God's sake. Mike Parry is his name.
Oh, okay. Give me 2 seconds to sort my light. You carry on. I'll be back in 1 second.
Yeah, no bother. Mike Parry. And, so he was on Jeremy Vine, and they were talking about Insulate Britain and people stopping traffic in the middle of the streets and what are the moralities of that and things like that. And he said, the problem is with this country is that we're too tolerant and we are too lenient towards minorities, and minorities need to be squashed.
Squashed. This sounds like a very violent way to deal with something.
Well, yeah, so he said the reason that people are allowed to go out in front of vehicles and stuff like that is because we're too tolerant to minorities, and minorities need to be squashed.
Jesus.
Which is like, sounds very yikesy, if you ask me.
It's extremely yikesy, yes. Hell.
Yeah, so it's very emotional on both sides of the argument. But Lewis, what do you think? Do you think that stopping a car is a good way to sort of make your point?
It's a very good way to get heard. That's very much the truth. Halting international trade, halting trucks, halting cars. It's a fantastic way to get heard and get your message across. It's not great for the optic of it, because what you'll end up doing is making people hate you, and then if they hate you, they'll hate your cause. So it's a balance, really, between, well, do you want people to dislike your cause? Do you want people to dislike that? Or do you want to get people's attention? So I suppose, I don't know, I'm sort of on the fence about it. What do you think?
I mean, I think the problem is that causes don't seem that worthwhile while they're happening, if you get me. Like, it's only with hindsight that we realise that stuff like the civil rights movement is incredibly important. But I bet at the time there were people that, oh, come on, it's not that bad, like, just come on, and just sort of on the fence. So it's like, it's hard to know which causes to take seriously and which ones are just going to like die out. But I have a feeling that years down the line we're probably going to be thinking, yeah, we should have stopped every single person that was like driving eventually. But at the same time, it's not as clear cut as stuff like racial injustice and things like that. It's like people trying to go to work, to their jobs in order to pay bills for their families so that they can eat. You know, there's a lot of overlap with decisions. But I get that it's to try and make the government sort of listen and pay more attention to it, which I think is also really important. So again, I'm going to have to be a boring old fucking centrist and not really give a real answer about what I think people should do about it. Darius said, well, stopping traffic isn't the best way to prove your point. Yeah, there was something about the guy who leads Insulate Britain doesn't even have his home insulated or something like that. And people were like, wow, why can't you you're going to tell other people to do it and you don't do it yourself? And he was like, yeah, it was really weird.
I suppose on the same level, that's kind of not the point.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what I do, just me, Lewis Brindley, what I do to combat climate change or not, will have no effect, no measurable effect on the global emissions of any kind, really.
Yeah.
But what does have an effect is big companies like Amazon. If Amazon released some kind of company-wide initiative or whatever we'll only use electric cars and electric planes and electric all the rest of it, and it will get all of our energy from nuclear reactors and it'll be very clean and green, then in that case, that's kind of what you need. Because Amazon uses so much more power than I do, I ever will in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the majority of the pollution is coming from. Forget what bin I put my rubbish in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I mainly use public transport, which legally has to be very clean these days. I think most buses I use have a hybrid system.
Yeah, I think most buses around here have a hybrid system, actually. When you see them go past, they have like a little green banner thing on the side.
Yeah.
Which I suppose is good. Plus, even if they didn't have that, it's one engine to ferry 30 people, rather than 30 engines ferrying 30 people, if they were all driving a car. And
A big sort of slogan that's been said has like been, change starts at home, which I have to say I don't like. I think that's more of a cop-out than anything else.
Yes.
It's like, because, changing my stuff isn't going to make Amazon behave more sort of eco-friendly. And with regards to stopping people in traffic, I'm maybe more sort of coming round to it, because we all have to do things now. Because if we accept that it's a very big threat and it will cost us land, resources, lives, then we have to accept that, we need to actually do things to change that, rather than say, yeah, it's a really big problem, and then do absolutely nothing to change your behaviour. So maybe it's maybe a bit oversighted to sort of stop people going to work so that they can pay their bills, but it's like, if we're not going to do that, then what are we going to do?
Yeah.
To get our point across to the governments of the countries that we live in, to say, take this fucking seriously.
Yeah, no, you're right, because it's not as much as it's not about like what we do at home. It's about the military having a dozen helicarriers out there, aircraft carriers out there, ferrying planes about, and it's about Jeff Bezos going to space and dumping more carbon into the atmosphere in 3 minutes than I will in 10 years. That's what it's about, really, these big, enormous sort of bits of change. However, we just need to change. That's the problem, is we just need to change, and nobody can agree on how to do the change. But can we just do something? Please, just do something. Anything would be better than nothing, surely.
The approved 2019 Department of Defence discretionary budget is $686.1 billion.
Jesus. Imagine if we spent 1% of that, £6 billion, on fighting climate change. How much can we do with £6 billion?
Yeah, that's absolutely.
God, this idea of military budgets and stuff, it utterly disgusts me.
Yeah.
The idea that we would rather be spending money on, in theory, sending people out to wars and getting them blown up and killed and doing horrific things to innocents and civilians, that we would rather be doing that than actually safeguarding the future. because it's all well and good to say, oh, well, if we didn't get involved in such and such, then we'd be speaking whatever different language now. Well, yeah, we would be, but it's all well and good to say we're protecting the future by sending soldiers out into war and protecting us from a theoretical version of something that might happen. But if sending those soldiers out to war means there'll be no future whatsoever because of the carbon impact and because of any sort of like a nuclear bomb being detonated, anything like that, I just can't conceive of how you can rationalise it. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it just seems like... It just seems like when you tell someone to stop doing something, and it's like, well, I've started now, so I'll finish this lot, and then I'll, stop. And it just seems to be like an addiction, if you get me. Like, it's always the next thing. There's always going to be another war. There's always going to be another fight for resources, and you can make as many excuses as you want. A lot of the excuses are very valid because, there are other countries that, every country wants to exert strategic will over other countries, So it's about enough people in the countries around the world saying, yeah, can we just not fucking do this at the moment in order to deal with the do you know what it's like? It's like Game of Thrones. It's exactly like Game of Thrones. The White Walkers are coming and we're all too busy having wars about who gets to sit on the fucking iron chair. It's like, because when you look at it that way, it looks really silly, and it's like, fucking pull yourselves together. They're gonna kill all of you, but somehow in our own world, it's like, well, you have to think about this and you have to think about that, and it's like, that's why political allegory works so well, because if you don't have a sort of vested interest in a world, you can look at it objectively and say, well, if you don't do that, you're all going to end up, ruined. And it's like, well, I'm fighting about the Targaryen throne that I lost. It's really important to me. It's like, well, yeah, okay, fine. It's important to you, but everyone's going to die if you don't deal with this. So if you look at it sort of that way, it makes it a bit easier to get your priorities in order, I think. But that's
certainly,
just me. But
anyway.
I think we've bullshitted to bullshit land.
We certainly have. This is true.
The throne of bullshit. Game
of shit.
Game of shit. That's the game we all play when we come into this world. The game of shit.
Indeed, it is.
Thought Squid Game was bad, but